This is the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
It is imperative that voters do not become lazy in this primary process, and we aggressively and ambitiously do our own homework.
With conservatives descending on Washington for CPAC 2012, you can be sure a strong Tea Party presence will be felt. Today, we're joined by one of the great voices in the movement and a big draw at CPAC, Mr. Kevin Jackson. Kevin is an author, the national spokesman for theteaparty.net, and the executive director of theblacksphere.net. Today, he's front and center on SaraNet Radio. Kevin Jackson here on the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. How you been, Kev?
Man, I'm doing great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And you have not been shy, sir, about speaking up about race in politics and how it's used. Do you expect President Obama to play the race card again this time around, especially since his opponent will likely be a white man, considering who's left in the field?
You think?
Well, hey, listen, some people are still holding out hope. And here, what, February? February, jump in, right? Or
yeah, well, it's pretty safe to say that he's running against a white guy. There's no doubt in my mind that there will be race and class in politics. He's already doing class because I think he feels like that's the easiest thing, you know, to pit rich against poor, and it's starting to backfire. Race is already, I will tell you, race isn't going away. You know, Holder is talking about voter ID and all these things are doing with race, and it's strictly a ploy. But at the end of the day, all politics boils down to race and class, and how they get their way boils down to quantity of people and quantity of money. So what my team has done is we've said we understand all those factors, and we're going to educate with humor the same way the left tends to do, because if you look at their big pundits, it's Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, you know, if not the Night Show host and all that. So we're trying to do the same thing.
Now, you brought him up already. I was going to mention him, too. Would a Herman Cain nomination, would that have put a stop to the racial aspect of campaigning?
No, it wouldn't have stopped it, because the left love to divide. And race is easy to divide, as is class. You know, when you say, hey, black people, they don't want you to have health care because they want you all dead, then believe it or not, that kind of crazy rhetoric resonates. Now, what's interesting to me is how we fight. And I'll give you an example. Santorum says, I'm pro-life, right? Well, if you extrapolate that and you say, well, 41% of abortions happen in the black community. Our abortion rate in the black community is 41%. The abortion rate overall as a nation is 19%, so it's more than double in the black community. So Rick Santorum, you would think, would say, I'm saving black people at over twice the rate of the left. Okay, but he's not going to see it that way because we don't learn how to fight correctly. But if he were to go into a black and say, guys, do you know at the turn of the 19th century, blacks were 19% of the population, and you're now 12.5% of the population, and the direct corollary is in the eugenics movement and the idea of Planned Parenthood. You are eradicating yourselves. So when I fight for abortion, I'm fighting for you.
But immediately you know what comes back from some of the guys you probably just mentioned a moment ago. Hey, how does Rick Santorum know how to talk about black folks?
Well, but, you know, look, the thing about talking about color is it's ridiculous that we run from that subject. We do more for the impoverished in America and the minorities in America than all the left have done in decades. In fact, if you did anything today, if you gave money $1 to a black vagrant, you've done more than all of the Democrats and the liberals have done for blacks in the last 5 decades, because they've done nothing for blacks or Hispanics. All they do is pander, and then they tell you can't say anything. If Newt Gingrich calls Barack Obama the food stamp president, it's got to be racial. It can't be the correlation that 16 million new food stamp people food stamps. It couldn't be the logic of it. It's got to be racial. Well, I applaud Gingrich for saying something like that and taking it on and daring the left to say, make it about color.
And, you know, and not just minorities. You look at just contributions as a whole. Again, back in '08 when you compared, say, Biden and Obama to Sarah Palin, who was of modest means at that time, not modest means, but compared to these guys running for office, and the percentages from the Palin household were much higher in charitable donations. You see it this time around, too, when you compare Romney and Obama of what they're giving. So that's been the thing, Kev. You know, the left's going to tell you where the money's going to go, and they know better than us. Meantime, conservatives are giving the money out of generosity.
Absolutely, and let's talk about Sarah Palin for a while. I was with her in a couple of locations when I was on tour, you know, just briefly. Wonderful lady, unbelievable, and to be honest with you, probably one of the most amazing poster children, if you want to use that term, for the conservative women and the conservative movement in general that you could possibly get. And what does the left do? They demonize her. They have to. They've got to find that. And whether it's her charitable contributions, which I'm sure I haven't researched that, so I'll take your word for it. But what I have researched in my latest book, which is called Sexy, is the level of giving that left has done, and that the book Sexy Brilliance, Political Lies is based on these fallacies of, an example, if I said to you, who's more homophobic, Cher or Dick Cheney, we all know what the average person would say, right? They'd say Dick Cheney.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, Cher, who's been given, I think, 5 GLAAD awards, gay lesbian awards, when her daughter/son decided that she wanted to declare that she wasn't who she was, chastity, wanted to be Chaz, Cher had a conniption. Cheney finds out his daughter's gay, no harm, no foul. He accepts it. But to hear the left, we're the homophobes, we're the intolerant ones. And so my book is just thing after thing where the left, where Madonna says, I won't let my daughter watch videos. Yet she's made all these videos that have made our little girls, you know, promiscuous and so on and so forth, but she won't let her daughter watch them.
Right.
It's crazy. And so what I do, without even having to look too hard, is I just say, look at the hypocrisy of these guys, and ask yourself, you know, do you want to follow that? Is this what we want the nation to be, or what, should we be following conservative principles? So Sarah Palin is a perfect example, and I talk about, I love all the things about this woman in the sense that she's, not only is she the breadwinner of her family, she was the highest ranking, so she's a poster child for the women's movement. She's very much into her marriage. She says, I'm happy to be a wife to her husband and a mother to her children, and so on and so forth. Then the perfect little family, you think, the conservative family, they have a daughter who has a child out of wedlock. What do? They embrace that. They understand that we're not fallible as Christians and as humans, and you accept it. But she's not saying I condone the activity. She's just saying I deal with the cards I'm dealt. But the left will say, oh, look at her, with how hypocritical of her daughter to have a baby out of wedlock. And then they'll talk about how hypocritical it is for her to have a child that's developmentally delayed or with Down syndrome. And you think to yourself, what is it with these folks? She's showing all the things that make up America, that make us great, and they want to be derisive of her.
We're left right now, Ron Paul, Rick Santorum, Mitt Romney, and Newt Gingrich. How do you think Sarah Palin would be doing right now if she had jumped in this thing?
That is so difficult to say, because the irony of Sarah Palin, when I go around the country and people, I talk about what, the various candidates, and one of the polls that we had at the TeaParty.net was what would be the impact if they started talking about various vice presidential candidates. And by the way, I said on many shows that the way that you could possibly change the picture of the presidential primaries, et cetera, is to start releasing the idea of who you might want to have as a vice presidential candidate, and that started happening.
I agree with you.
But going back to Sarah, what's interesting about it is she's a polarizing figure, not only for the women on the left, but many women that call themselves conservative women and some conservative guys. She's polarizing to some degree on the right, which I find really ironic, because if you're a true conservative, I can't think of any reason why you would say, I don't like Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
Now you can say, Well, she doesn't. She's never been a senator or congressman or whatever. I call those pluses necessarily because I prefer governor.
Yes.
But you know, I can't find any reason. But yet, when I travel, talk to certain people, they'll say, "I just don't like her." And so, as you dig a little deeper, I think it comes down to the idea, Sarah. And I hate to sound pandering because I'm not really pandering. This is truly my view. She's a woman who kind of represents doing it all. She's so accomplished in government, rising to governor. You can call Alaska a little state. Alaska is an interesting state. A lot of idiosyncrasies to that environment, and she had to be prepared for that. And you can't be dumb and be the governor of Alaska. So you can throw that out. So she's done that. She's I don't know she and her husband, I've never seen them interact per se, but I get the impression that they have a pretty good family life. And, you know, her husband is a regular guy working in the field, or used to be anyway. And so you can see that she's a pretty good wife. My bet is she's a pretty good wife. She appears to be a pretty good mom. So even with conservative women, I think she comes off almost too good. You know what I mean? And I think that scares people because they're using her as a measuring stick. And I say, don't use Sarah Palin as a measuring stick, but applaud her for what she is. It was like when Romney and guys were all talking about, well, I've been married. Romney goes in the South Carolina debate, I've been married for 42 years, and I've got 5 kids and 6 grandkids and 13 cats and 3 mice. You know, and Santorum was like, right. Well, I've been married. I've got 7 kids. You know, and there's Ron Paul. I've got 52. I mean, I've been married 52 years.
Yeah, it's like they're reading the back of their family baseball card.
Right, but then there was Newt. You know, twice divorced. You know, sexual deviance standing before the man, right?
Yeah, well, hey, listen, you know what that was all about. It. Whoever's in front, we're going to cut them down from these panels who are asking these questions.
What America said with Newt and the way he went about saying, look, I'm a failed person, just like you, maybe not in the ways that you failed, but I'm a failed person. And I really believe that, and I wrote a blog about it that was called "The Rise of the Flawed Republican" or the flawed conservative, because heretofore you've had to be perfect, and that's what I keep going back to Sarah on this, that she was almost too perfect, and the two things that technically would have been her flaws, which is the daughter with the pregnancy out of wedlock, and her her Down syndrome child, really just made her even more perfect to a degree, because they showed that she could absorb these hits in her family life. It wasn't like all the kids are perfect, you know, in the way that society would define them, where the daughter wouldn't have the baby out of wedlock and her child wouldn't have Down syndrome. But she's dealt those cards, and she dealt, she played her hand so well. And I think that was a problem for a lot of people. Well, Newt is running into some of the same things. Newt is sort of making it to where if Sarah came back, and in my opinion, I think people would say, you know what, conservatives aren't perfect, and I think it would be a very different dynamic. Because think about it, 2 or 3 years ago, man, I don't think anybody out there would have said Newt Gingrich would be a viable presidential candidate at this stage of the game.
Oh, yeah, no way.
Yeah. So now when Herman Cain, I think somebody wrote an article that said Herman Cain should have waited 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I thought about it, too. I said, you know, because I liked, you know, the verbiage of suspended, you know, those campaigns you could still pop back in. And I don't know. I thought at least have a few votes to see how he would have done in that first one. But, you know.
Oh, come on. Suspended is 1 foot on the grave and the other on a banana peel.
Well, you got that right. But listen, notice since he's been out of the race, haven't heard a peep about any of the allegations.
No, well, you know, it was funny. I had dinner with Herman a couple of Sundays ago in Vegas, and we talked candidly about that. And that was one of the comments is, you know, look at it. You know, it's all gone. And he's got his suspicions about how it all came about. And it was really an interesting conversation, but can't share it because it was private. But definitely, you know, if it had been after the so-called Newt allegations and Herman had handled it that way, who knows? He may still be in. But my point is this. Obama has done so poorly in governing this nation and leading this nation that what was in vogue in 2008 which is the guy who was style over substance, who had no record to run on, who anybody with a brain would say is the most unqualified person to be president probably in the history of this country. He gets elected, and less than 4 years later, the complete antithetical to that 2008 candidate, I'm talking the rich, white, Republican insider who's got a pretty snarly attitude and, you know, has lots of flaws,
Yeah.
he's now one of the front runners. That tells you just how quickly the worm has turned. And I tell you, conservatism better jump on this, because what people are looking at is saying, okay, we're willing to give liberalism a shot. We see it on steroids and irradiated, and we don't like it.
Yep. And I said that when he was elected. I said the one good thing here is if people play their cards right on the Republican side, you may not see a Dem in there for a real long time. The only bad news, of course, is the Supreme Court justices. You can't erase that too quickly. But other than that, it might not have been the worst thing in the world, you know, to say, all right, here it is. Now never do that again, kids.
Well, I hate to bring it up because, I mean, it's such a controversial word, and I think it's kind of funny, but the whole birther thing, you know, with the situation that happened in Georgia, where they're now saying he's not going to be on the ballot unless he gives valid documents.
Right.
Who knows? Could be a ripple effect on that if it turns out that, you know, and by the way, I don't care one way or the other. I tell people, look, his mom was American. I know that. So for me, not a big deal. Now, the constitutionalists are like, Kevin, you can't be messing with the Constitution, man. Okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, his mom, you know, I don't care who she decided to make her baby daddy. But at the end, you know, if it turns out that it all has to be undone, talk about tough to get that can of worms back in there, man, you know?
Do you have black Americans reaching out to you at all and saying, hey, listen, I agree with you, but the pressure to vote Democrat or support Obama is just so huge that they have trouble, at least publicly, expressing conservatism?
Well, man, you know I speak for all black people, right?
That's right. Listen, I tell you what, I think you speak for a higher percentage than most people realize, you know, and I say this about a lot of groups that are always painted into the Democrat side.
Right.
You know, for me, at least my friends and people I'm around, most people I know, they get up every morning, they go to work, they worry about their kids, they worry about their job, they love this country, and, you know, they're not worrying about the blowhards on TV or the few people who have the media voice. So I think that the percentages are higher. But that said, you know, there's no doubt about it that a huge amount of the black vote did go to President Obama. So,
no question.
You know, do people ever say things to you along those lines about like, oh yeah, we're this way, but we unfortunately have to keep it quiet because you're shunned in your own family in a lot of places.
Yeah, let me tell you, Obama broke up a lot of friendships and families, probably, seriously, more, and I'm not even joking about it, more than any in the history of presidencies. But to answer your question directly, yes. There was an overwhelming number of blacks who saw the ability to get a black president, a fully black president, and well, I should say a half-black president, but one that was recognizable in the office a big deal. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but Eisenhower was 25% black, and a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of the civil rights legislation that we have today, he was the father of it, the modern civil rights movement beginning in 1957 with the Civil Rights Act. So even though LBJ gets credit for it, but it comes as a shock to most people that Eisenhower would technically be considered black on his birth certificate because he has so much black blood. But that being said, blacks, now that the fervor of getting the first quote-unquote recognizable black into office is done, Obama's losing a lot of black support. The latest polling shows him down to 79% approval with blacks. Now let's separate approval from actual voting. Blacks do not vote in overwhelming numbers Democrat that people think, which is you'll hear anything of north of 90, as high as 96%. They don't. I've looked at voting records of this, and blacks may vote like 69, 72%. It's not in the 90s. Now the fallacy is that it's in the 90s. Now if you say, do you support the black person, blacks will overwhelmingly support Obama. When they get in the ballot box, you're not seeing those numbers. And those numbers are going to drop off dramatically in both cases. Not only support, but also the vote. People will talk, you know, at the water cooler, they'll say, based on intimidation and things like that, they'll toe the party line. I'm one of the few people that goes into a black audience and goes, I didn't vote for him because, I got a pair. But most people won't do that. But in the ballot box, they don't vote for Obama and won't vote for him in nearly the overwhelming numbers that you think. Will he get the majority of the black vote? Yes. Will he get 90% or more? No way. Not going to happen.
All right, Kevin. Well, I hope so, and I really appreciate you being on today. Let's do it again. You're great.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, pal. Take care. Be sure to visit the teaparty.net and theblacksphere.net and pick up Kevin Jackson's great books, the new ones, Sexy Brilliance and Other Political Lies, plus The Big Black Lie. Kevin Jackson, really a true patriot and a super guy, a leader in the Tea Party movement for years to come. Next week, we will take a look back at CPAC 2012. Well, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. Visit SaraNetRadio.net for continuing coverage of Governor Palin. Also, follow us on Twitter at SaraNet Radio, and we are now on Facebook, so please like SaraNet Radio on Facebook. I want to thank everyone here at SaraNet Radio. Thanks to Kevin Jackson, and thank you for listening today. Please be sure to join us next time for another edition of the Palin Update. I'm Kevin Scholla. Have a pleasant day.